Good afternoon. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Dr. Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, joins us this hour. We will chat with him about the Attorney General's testimony ongoing today before the United States House Judiciary Committee. Jason Miyares, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia, here at 4:30. We'll talk about early voting with him. And then Mark Green joins us at 5 o'clock, the congressman from Tennessee. Another hearing going on today, the Homeland Security Committee, looking into the financial burden on us that our border crisis has delivered. And you can chat with us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. As I mentioned, the hearing, it continues at this very moment.
Would understand this from common knowledge. You would not actually give the heads up. Would you agree with that?
I think as a general matter, that's correct.
IRS Supervisory Special Agent Gary Shapley, one of the whistleblowers, testified that AUSA Leslie Wolf told investigators, quote, optics were a driving factor in the decision not to request a search warrant for the guest house at the Biden's Delaware residence where Hunter Biden had stayed for a time. AUSA Wolf further told the investigators that, quote, there was more than enough probable cause for the physical search warrant there, but the question was whether the juice was worth the squeeze. And she further said, quote, a lot of evidence in the investigation would be found in the guest house of former Vice President Biden, but there is no way investigators will get that approved. Now, do you agree with Ms. Wolf that optics of an investigation should be the driving factor in law enforcement decisions when investigating potential crimes?
I have to say again, as I said before, singling out assistant U.S. attorneys is a dangerous matter.
Oh, shut up.
The supervisor of that case is Mr. Weiss. He is the one who made decisions in that case. He is the one.
He's spent the entire hearing covering up for Leslie Wolf today.
So let's take her out of the equation then. Let's just take the statement generally. Do you believe that optics of an investigation should be a driving factor in law enforcement decisions as to whether or not to execute a search warrant or not?
The Justice Department has standards for its work, and improper considerations are not part of those. The only questions are those driven by the facts and the law.
Mr. Shapley also testified that AUSA Wolf objected to a search warrant IRS investigators requested for a storage unit purportedly containing...
By the way, this is live questioning we're in right now.
Law firm owned by Hunter Biden. Investigators scheduled a call with U.S. Attorney Weiss, who agreed that they could search the storage unit if it remained abandoned for 30 days. But immediately after the call, investigators learned that AUSA Wolf had reached out to Hunter Biden's defense counsel to tell them about the storage unit, effectively ruining investigators' chance to access potentially critical evidence. In your experience, as you said earlier, this is not the typical thing that happens, correct?
Look, once again, I don't know anything about these allegations. I don't know whether they are correct or not. These are questions most appropriately put to Mr. Weiss at the appropriate time and to be covered in his report if he thinks that's the appropriate way to resolve.
Can you conceive of a reason why Mr. Weiss or Ms. Wolf would have given a heads up to Hunter Biden's legal team that the search of the storage unit was forthcoming?
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals about this.
For somebody that was involved in the investigation at that point, who was literally delaying obtaining potential evidence in the case, do you think it was appropriate that then she was involved in the negotiation of the IRS deal with Hunter Biden?
I'm not.
The
I'm not
plea
actually
deal.
following the question.
The plea deal.
Assistant U.S. attorneys who participate in investigation also participate in prosecutions. Is that what you're asking?
Attorney General, I appreciate your time here today, but I'm concerned that these facts are just some examples of what's been going on.
He's out of time. All right, so the questioning we were just listening to is actually some of the most interesting questioning all day. Am I right, Corey? I mean, we've been listening to this thing all day long. That was Nathaniel Moran, a Republican from Texas, just putting to Merrick Garland questions about the interference that the Justice Department has conducted into the investigation into the Biden family. And specifically asking about Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf. Remember, she is a woman who works inside of the U.S. Attorney's office in Delaware for David Weiss. And so over the course of these last, 5 years now that Weiss has been conducting this investigation into the Biden family, she's been present for much of this. And according to the IRS whistleblowers, she was interfering in the investigation and creating and stopping them from asking questions about Dad, about Joe Biden, and additionally tipping off the Biden team, the Biden family, about important investigative steps that the government was about to take. A lot of this, as Garland kept on trying to pass the buck today, well, a lot of the allegations involve the prior administration. This happened on Donald Trump's watch, said Garland, by way of kind of sort of like, separating himself from all of this. Well, it wasn't during my watch. This was during Bill Barr's watch. Okay, fine. But why did you make this guy a special counsel then, given those allegations? How can you sit there with a straight face, as he did today, and routinely say that, look, I'm not involved in this at all. I'm staying completely separate from it. U.S. Attorney Weiss, special counsel Weiss now, he gets to do whatever he wants, and I'm not going to interfere, and I'm not going to get involved. But if there are constant allegations, credible allegations of interference in the investigation, don't you think it merits that the boss of the Justice Department would ask a few questions over how this investigation is being conducted? Here's Gary Shapley, the IRS whistleblower, in his testimony before the House earlier this year. Here's what he had to say about the way the DOJ was interfering.
DOJ slow-walked steps to include interviews, serving document requests, and executing search warrants. Warrants that were ready as early as April of 2020, but were delayed until after the November 2020 election and never pursued. Investigators were not allowed to follow up on WhatsApp messages from Hunter Biden's Apple iCloud backup, where he suggested he was sitting next to his father. Assistant United States Attorney Leslie Wolf cited the optics of executing a search warrant at President Biden's residence as a deciding factor for not allowing it, even though she agreed that probable cause existed. Prosecutors instructed investigators not to ask about the big guy or dad when conducting interviews.
It's amazing.
The Biden transition team was tipped off about interviews the night before the investigation went overt, a fact my FBI counterpart confirmed to this committee in a recent testimony, where the result was that only one witness spoke to investigators that day. These are just some of the examples of how our investigation was stymied. I'm not here to support partisan agendas on either side. I'm here because our tax system relies on the American people having confidence it is administered fairly and equally for everyone, regardless of your last name or political connections. If the handling of this case was inappropriate, it doesn't matter whether it happened under a Republican or Democrat administration.
Exactly.
Whether you agree with my concerns about the unethical slow walking and preferential treatment in this case, you can be sure that my testimony is true and correct to the best.
Okay, so that was Gary Shapley and his testimony, his excellent testimony before Congress. There's nobody who's really called it into question at all. They haven't been able to, do anything to even harm this guy's credibility in any meaningful way. Additionally, it has since been reported by multiple outlets on multiple occasions that the things that the IRS whistleblowers are saying, it turns out are true, including that the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, David Weiss, sought assistance in charging. He wanted to charge in various districts around the country, he said, and he was blockaded in both California and Washington, D.C. by Biden appointees, to include right here in Washington, D.C., by Matthew Graves, the U.S. Attorney for the district. He was stopped. And so that was a subject of much discussion today. Jim Jordan, the chairman of the committee, tried to suss this out of Merrick Garland, and Garland gave a very bizarre, sort of lawyerly, wandering answer to whether or not David Weiss actually had the authority to pursue this case.
Quote, Mr. Weiss has full authority to bring cases in other jurisdictions if he feels it's necessary. That was your response, Attorney General, to Senator Grassley's question on March 1st, 2023. You just referenced it when Mr. Bishop was questioning you. Only problem is he'd already been turned down by the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, Mr. Graves. So he didn't have full authority, did he?
I had an extended conversation with Senator Grassley at the time. We briefly touched on the Section 515 question and how that process went. I've never been suggested.
My point's real simple, Mr. Garland. You said he had complete authority, but he'd already been turned down. He wanted to bring an action in the District of Columbia, and the U.S. Attorney there said, no, you can't. And then you go tell the United States Senate under oath that he has complete authority.
I'm going to say again that no one had the authority to turn him down. They could refuse to partner with him. They could not
use whatever language. Refuse to partner is turning down.
Yeah, of course. So he has complete authority, but other U.S. attorneys can tell him to take a walk. Take a hike, dude. Up yours. I'm not helping. So why is he bothering asking these people? I thought if he has complete authority, why does he need their help at all? So he goes to these other U.S. attorneys and says, hey, look, I'm interested in bringing charges here. They say no. And then he turns around and apparently he tells the IRS whistleblowers, I'm not the deciding guy here. I can't do this. And then what changed? So Weiss has put out a bunch of letters now to Congress saying, oh, yeah, I did have complete authority. Merrick Garland the whole time has been saying, oh, yeah, I've given him complete authority. Well, then why is he a special counsel now? What is the point of becoming a special counsel? If he had all the powers in the first place, why become a special counsel now? Merrick Garland had no answers to that question today. In fact, he kept saying that I can't discuss the deliberative process. I'm not going to talk about that. Really? In fact, here's a question Congressman Mike Johnson wanted to know from Merrick Garland. Have you had personal contact with anybody at the FBI about the FBI HQ about the Hunter Biden investigation? And listen to his answer.
Have you had personal contact with anyone at FBI headquarters about the Hunter Biden investigation?
First of all, of course. The answer to this is of course. He is the Attorney General of the United States. This is one of the most high-profile cases in the entire country. FBI headquarters. Have you talked to a single soul at FBI headquarters, and have the words Hunter Biden escaped the lips of either you or the person with whom you were speaking? The answer to that is so obviously yes.
Investigation.
I don't recollect the answer to that question, but
garbage, just garbage. The answer to that is, of course I have. But if he wants to, dive in here and be like, but I've never interfered in the investigation. That's not what he does. He says, I don't recollect the answer to that question. I'm not certain if the words Hunter Biden have ever come out of my mouth up until today.
So FBI works for the Justice Department. It's.
I'm sorry. You don't recollect whether you've talked with anybody at FBI headquarters about an investigation into the president's son?
I don't believe that I did. I promised the Senate when I came before it for confirmation that I would leave Mr.
He's lying. By the way, he's lying under oath. I don't believe that I did.
Weiss in place, and that I would not interfere with his investigation.
Okay,
I have kept that promise.
It's such a goofy thing. Also, Garland today said on multiple occasions, as if this matters, in case you're wondering if he's playing politics, right? So the argument he keeps making is, I'm trying to keep politics out of this. The Justice Department is blind to political affiliation. And yet Merrick Garland said, I can't even count the number of times he said it today. He said that Mr. Weiss was appointed by Donald Trump. He kept bringing that up as if that said something about that his biases and how there's no way he would go easy on Hunter Biden if he was appointed by Donald Trump. Who could even question him here? And that is political spin. It's the same crap the left has been saying throughout all of this. It's the same crap the media has been saying out of all of this. And they remove the most important context about Weiss's appointment. Weiss was acting U.S. attorney, assigned by the Obama administration to that role. Eventually, he does become U.S. attorney. It is true, nominated by Donald Trump. But in order for him to be nominated and confirmed in the United States Senate, he was handpicked by the two Democrat senators from Delaware. Coons and Carper chose Weiss for that job. And that's the only way he gets through, because they have veto power for the U.S. Attorney's Office in their state. The Senate blue slip allows the Democrat senators from Delaware to decide ultimately who gets that job. They chose Weiss. They chose Weiss. So every time Garland says today, well, Trump chose him, that is despicable misdirection. It is a political hatchet job. It's designed to try and take you off the scent of what is very obviously corruption inside the United States Department of Justice. I've got more audio for you today. Merrick Garland, just a long hearing today, deeply frustrating in so many ways. One of them is that Merrick Garland, at the age of 70, he's, it's pretty young, 70 years old in relative terms. I mean, Joe Biden's like 100. But he kept saying, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Can you repeat the question? And that is one of the most maddening things to even see, because each congressman only gets 5 minutes of questioning. And if it takes 40 seconds for them to set up a question, and then Garland stares at them like he's got a chunk of something in his ears, and he's like, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat the question? It just filibusters all the time. It just destroyed so much of the time today. I don't even know how many times he asked for repeats. You can see the look on his face like, I'm having trouble hearing. They should give him one of those old-fashioned ear horns or something. He sticks it right in his ear and points it at the member of Congress, so we don't have these problems. It's 3:21 now. Fetterman can wear a hoodie. Merrick Garland can wear an ear horn. Also, he got all high and mighty today. Anytime anybody brought up this assistant U.S. attorney, Leslie Wolf, who's accused of doing all sorts of things to disrupt the investigation into the Bidens, he would say, well, stop mentioning individual members of the Department of Justice. You're going to bring about threats to them, as if they're the victims here, and that you can't have oversight of the Justice Department and mention individuals because it's too dangerous to talk about government officials. It's insane. The Congress has oversight. Who are we paying? Your money is going to her. We deserve to know what her job is. He wouldn't even say whether or not she still works for the Department of Justice today. He refused. What? It's all so crazy. Let me take a call here. I've got Richard calling in from Manassas, line 1. Richard, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thanks for taking my call. That question about whether or not Merrick Garland's talked to the FBI about Hunter Biden, that should have been a clear trap question. Either he has talked to the FBI, okay, so what did you talk about? Or if you didn't talk to the FBI, is the FBI now a rogue agency? They're not under the basically, quote-unquote, Secretary of Justice's purview?
Right.
That they're just going to do whatever they want? That should have been a trap.
It's exactly right. And he knows the answer. Like, the guy's obviously smart enough to be able to answer that question. If he had made an active decision not to talk to the FBI about Hunter Biden, he would have said that. He would have said, nope, never have. In fact, I made an active decision not to. And so, therefore, it is incredibly obvious that he has. And he sits up there and then he lies. He obfuscates. He's like, I'm not really sure if I've had that conversation. Do you ever go to work? Is this your first day? What kind of conversations have you had on this subject? You think you would remember Mr. Attorney General of the United States. Thank you, Richard. Good call. Coming up, Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, set to join us. We'll talk about the out-of-control Justice Department and how we can get rid of this deep state coming up in the years ahead. Kevin Roberts next. Good afternoon to you. 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia is here with us at 4:30. That's Jason Miyares. We'll chat with him then. And then Congressman Mark Green joins us at 5 o'clock. We've got a lot going on. We've got a border crisis, a full-blown border crisis. Big hearing today on that subject, as well as the separate hearing with the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland. I want to talk more about that hearing because, Garland sits there today and just says over and over and over again that everything at the Department of Justice is fine. There's nothing for Americans to be worried about. There are no political considerations whatsoever, and that he's not even following the details of the David Weiss investigation into Hunter Biden and his business dealings because he's staying out of it, he says, and apparently not bothered at all by all of the many credible reports of corruption in that investigation, DOJ interference in that investigation. For more on this, I want to bring in the president of the Heritage Foundation and the host of the Kevin Roberts Show. Dr. Kevin Roberts joins us now. Sir, good to have you with us.
Vince, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
What do you make of this? Merrick Garland sits up there today and acts like everything's above board, and it is a deeply frustrating thing to watch.
Well, it is. I just look at it as an ordinary American and wonder how it is that not only Attorney General Garland, but so many members of this administration can sit before Congress with straight faces and lie through their teeth. The good news, the silver lining, is that the majority of the American people know that, and hopefully there will be consequences next year. The problem, though, is that this administration, in particular Garland, has inflicted a lot of damage upon us. And frankly, Vince, I think the country has largely moved to a position of entire distrust, not just of this administration, but of government in general. That's a very dangerous place for us to be.
Yeah, and there's a massive pile of evidence in front of us that demonstrates that the Justice Department is being used to advance the interests of one political party against the other. If you're looking at just the last week's news. You're seeing more January 6 prosecutions, including for people who weren't at the Capitol. A slap on the wrist for that guy, Ray Epps, who actually was at the Capitol trying to incite people to go into the building. You have multiple grandmothers who were pro-lifers in their 70s who were just convicted, set to be sentenced to up to 11 years in prison for standing outside of abortion mills. You've got, some of the testimony today went over the fact that the Department of Justice targeted parents across the country for just going to school board meetings and speaking up. You had FBI field offices targeting Catholics for their views and saying that FBI agents should infiltrate churches. We've got something going on that's very out of control right now.
Well, we do, and it's not an overstatement when you listen to that eloquent but troubling litany of examples you just mentioned to say that we are living in George Orwell's America. I mean, it's honest to God, as I sit here talking to you, even though you and I cover this a lot and your audience certainly does, that this, in fact, is modern America. This is what we're confronting. And what we say here at Heritage, Vince, as you know, is that this battle for America, when you think about what the Department of Justice is doing and picking one side and imposing the entire power of the federal government on the other side, is no longer a battle of right versus left, of conservative versus liberal. It is us versus them. Common Americans against the American regime. I'm an early American historian, a proud American like you and all of your audience. I don't like saying that because it casts this beautiful republic in a bad light. But we got a narrow path ahead to take this country back. And we got to understand that what's going on with this hearing today with Garland, what Mayorkas says every time he's in front of a similar committee, is just lies. And they know that they can get away with it because most of the media are complicit with them. The only way we are going to fix this is for Congress to be even more aggressive than the committee members were today. They really ought to press their advantage because I'll just make one quick but important point. In the rules package that was passed in January as a result of Kevin McCarthy becoming Speaker, Congress disallowed any of the members of the administration from saying that under an existing investigation that they would not be able to talk about details about that. Congress said you would be held in contempt of Congress if you refuse to provide that information. That's exactly what Garland did today, and it would be great to see the chairman and the members of his committee press that advantage because they laid the groundwork for that.
Interesting. So that is actually in the rules that these Republicans agreed to, that there are consequences for stalling with Congress and not telling the American people what's actually happening. They should absolutely hold them accountable. And it's the only thing that works. I mean, remember when you had the FBI director refuse to hand over the FBI informant document, the FD 1023 form that detailed the Biden family bribery scheme in Ukraine. It was under a threat of contempt of Congress that he finally relented.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And obviously, some people can decide that they want to take the risk of that contempt of Congress charge. But that's a precise example of a little bit of the power that conservatives in Congress have that they don't use enough. Look, I'm grateful to the chairman and his committee for today's hearing, but the problem is you don't take the important news out of that comes out of that hearing and break into the American public at large. I mean, obviously, it's wonderful you talk about it and a few others until and unless you make it newsworthy. And what would be newsworthy is that committee holds him in contempt of Congress for trying to shroud himself under the language of an existing investigation. They knew. The leaders of the House Republicans in January knew that's what the Biden administration was going to do. It's really important that they go on offense here.
Right. And if you have an ongoing investigation that is as credibly accused of being corrupt as this one is, you can't, as the Attorney General, just keep sitting back and going, well, it's an ongoing investigation. I can't get involved until it's over. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's like a football game where your favorite team is up by a couple touchdowns and they're playing prevent defense and not letting the other team into it, or a boxing match where one guy's got much longer arms and the other opponent can't even touch him. The House Republicans cannot allow the Biden administration to do that, not just because of the rule, although that's the mechanical thing that's in their hand,
yes,
but also because they have to use the platform they have in order to highlight the intransigence and I would argue, as you know, the injustice and evil of this administration.
What is happening with the American left in your view? As you mentioned, you're an American historian. It seems to me that they are as brazen as they've ever been in my lifetime about their contempt for our democratic system. They keep talking about our democracy. I don't think that they really have a lot of respect for our constitutional republic, or any for that matter. There's an effort right now to try and remove Donald Trump from the ballot, and yet they're accusing the right of, messing up our elections. What's going on with the American left right now?
Well, two things. The first and most important is that the word democracy to the radical left right now means their power over us, that they get to implement their regime against the power, the authority, the rights of anyone who disagrees with them. But the second thing, just to be an academic for a moment, if you don't mind, the American left exemplified a couple of generations ago best by Senator Moynihan of New York, a thoughtful, certainly left of center statesman, someone Heritage disagreed with at the time but respected immensely. There was a certain legitimacy to that political program, right? Sort of FDR New Dealism. I happen to disagree with all of that on the policy merits, but that was a valid, legitimate, alternative view to the role of the individual, or the role of government in an individual's life. Obviously, today, it's not even about that, in large part because they've succeeded in so much of their program. It really is about, to your point, destroying political opposition. It has come full circle, and now really is probably best described as the totalitarian left, because they want you and me and your audience to have no rights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when they exploit criminality to disarm law-abiding citizens on a routine basis, they're kind of giving the game away. There's another piece here that I want to talk about, Kevin Roberts. You mentioned Congress, Republicans, what they should be doing with their power. I know they're in the midst of this big budget fight right now, and I keep thinking I'm not hearing enough about defunding the abusive elements of our government. There's a whole range of them. We're talking about the Department of Justice today, plenty of agencies, offices within the Department of Justice who deserve to be defunded. There's also, for instance, the NGOs that we give immense millions of dollars at least to in order to traffic more illegal immigrants into our country on a daily basis. Why are we still funding programs like this? And why aren't Republicans presenting legislation to defund those programs at this pivotal moment?
Well, the short answer, and it's not going to be a surprise to you, is that there is a lack of political courage on Capitol Hill, even among the House Republicans. The majority of them, to be clear, are certainly courageous men and women, but what Heritage has been working on, what I'm literally going to go be working on as soon as I get off the phone with you walking over to the Capitol, is the tenets of a deal that rests upon what you just said, which is, let's move forward. Let's get the most conservative package we can get to keep the government open, because if we don't, we're going to get our teeth kicked in. Let's pass a continuing resolution that gets us to early 2024, when we got the political credibility, the leverage to have a conversation about this. But to your point, Vince, the path forward is to pick 2 or 3 or 4 examples from Homeland Security, from Department of Justice, and defund them. Defund the NGOs. Defund a couple of the really troublesome parts of the Department of Justice. Obviously, the point is the plan needs to be bolder than that, but you can't get enough votes to pass it. Let's go have a circumscribed version of this that can be passed right now, and not only for the substance, but also for the messaging, to convey to the American people that there actually is hope. There is a plan moving forward. You should not despair about the future, because here's the blueprint for it. We need political courage by the Speaker and by the House Republicans to get this done in the next days.
Right. And I'm not living under some illusion that they're going to get 20% spending cuts in the government. The Democrats control the Senate and the White House, obviously. But I do think there are things where there's bipartisan agreement right now. There is meaningful bipartisan agreement that illegal immigration is completely out of control in the country. And a lot of people are feeling that and expressing that, all the way to the point that you have Democrat mayors saying it out loud. Now, their solution's different. They want more federal money. But regardless, the problem very much exists. And if you step forward and you say, hey, we're going to stop trafficking more illegal foreign nationals into your city, I think people of all political backgrounds will sign on to that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just think about the rhetoric of New York Mayor Eric Adams, no conservative, right?
Right.
Who sounds like a conservative when he's complaining about illegal immigration. And then the mechanical point is, The House Republicans passed that bill on border security, House Resolution 2. Use that language as the basis for funding the government for a few months and then get into 2024 when you got a lot of leverage over the left. Biden will probably be even less popular if in fact, well, he'll be less popular. I won't be too fatalistic in what I think is going to happen to the president in terms of his health and competency. But the point is we'll have a lot of leverage. And that's the fight. That's when we ought to have the fight about these things. In the meantime, we need the courage to get there.
Another piece I want to talk to you about, and that's the deep state. You mentioned the tyrannical, totalitarian left. We got a headline overnight that the Department of Homeland Security has assembled another advisory panel because the government needs more advisory panels. And this panel includes James Clapper and John Brennan, two of the most notorious liars in American history, very much have abused their power through the years. They are now joining the Biden administration in an advisory role. First of all, what do you think of that news? And I understand the Heritage Foundation has some plans to try and tackle this deep state problem going into 2025.
Well, what I think about that news is that it's obviously troubling. It's in a really weird, ironic way. It's fitting, right? Because the Biden administration is the island of misfit toys. So those two jokers fit in well. What Heritage does, of course, is not just complain about that, and it's legitimate to complain about it, but we put together a plan that isn't just a presidential transition project. It is a plan, Project 2025, to dismantle, to upend, to change forever the administrative state in Washington, D.C. And the beauty of this is almost every conservative group of note in D.C. and around the country is part of this. We have 75 groups who are part of it. It's a very advanced plan with policies and personnel and executive orders to go in, not just in the first 90 days, Vince, but as I like to say, the first minute of the first day for the next conservative president, whoever he or she is. I'm really optimistic that with the right messaging and framing between now and next November, conservatives are going to win. I'm particularly optimistic that if conservatives do, this is the blueprint for government that's actually going to reclaim this great republic.
Lastly, Donald Trump is the big front runner in that race right now. Is it your impression, Kevin Roberts, as a guy who's working on this very important project, that Donald Trump is on board with it?
It's not just my impression. It's my firsthand knowledge that President Trump, Governor DeSantis, Vice President Pence, almost the entire field, with just a couple of minor exceptions of candidates who have no chance of winning, they're all on board. You know, Heritage is agnostic in the presidential race. We want the most conservative of those men or women to be the standard bearer. We've briefed them all. They're big fans. A lot of their messaging reflects it. And so I don't want to sound overconfident, certainly not have any hubris here on behalf of Heritage or the project, but we just know that this is going to be the blueprint regardless of who our nominee and president-elect is.
All right. It's always good to hear from you. Dr. Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation. Nice to talk to you today, sir. Also, you can find him on the Kevin Roberts Show. Excellent show. Thank you, sir. An amazing story developing this afternoon. Tommy Tuberville out of Alabama, the Republican senator who's been fighting to stop the cult of death going on in the American government, as the Pentagon pushing abortions. Tommy Tuberville says, okay, you know what? You're going to push abortions against the law. But additionally, I'm not going to just, give you a thumbs up to confirm every single military nominee at once. That's not going to happen. You want to confirm these guys, do it individually. That's what Tuberville's been saying. Guess what's happening now? Chuck Schumer is now starting to bring up votes on an individual basis. In other words, regular order. His hand has been forced. Now, what's hilarious about this is the media, of course, is pretending like it's Chuck Schumer who's the genius here. Like this is a masterstroke. Politico headline, Schumer takes on Tuberville's blockade, teeing up votes on top military picks. ABC, Schumer sets votes to circumvent Tuberville blockade on key military promotions. CBS is doing it too today. Their headline on this is... let's see. It's like unreadable, of course, as I'm staring at it, but it's regardless. Schumer moves to push 3 military nominations through Tuberville blockade. That's CBS. CNN's one of the only places who did it right. I can't believe I'm complimenting CNN. I haven't read the rest of the piece, but here's the headline. Tuberville forces Schumer's hand as the majority leader sets up votes to happen as soon as Wednesday afternoon. Their lead sentence, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has caved to a demand by Senator Tommy Tuberville to bring up a small handful of votes on military promotions to the Senate floor, even as he assailed the Alabama Republicans' tactics. Schumer loves abortion. He loves it. It's like one of his favorite things. So he gave a speech today talking about how it's his favorite thing, and he's very angry at Tommy Tuberville. But he is caving, in the words of CNN now. And Tommy Tuberville, God bless him, very few Republican senators have stood in solidarity with this guy. They should, by the way, all of them should, because he's on the side of the law, on the side of decency, on the side of life, on the side of normalcy, on the side of America. You want to be on the opposite side of that? Join Chuck Schumer. It's 3:58.